Hello. So we're going to finish up with Judges today. And when we were together last time, we had gotten into chapter 17 of Judges. And so, again, in way of review, chapter 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 will end Judges. And we're going to do a quick review, or excuse me, just a kind of a quick ending here to Judges. And this snapshot of chapter 17 through 21 does not really forward anything historically here in Judges, nor does the next book of Ruth that we're going to be getting into. But what it does is it's just kind of a snapshot into the time of Judges, just giving an incidence here of and an incidence and also a looking glass of what was going on during this time period. So, with chapter 17, leaving off last time, we kind of saw the really the decay of what was going on here. So here's the Israelite people, the Jewish people, the Hebrew people in the land, in the promised land, among the Canaanites, and rather than living into this blessing of what God had promised them and given to them, with a condition of them obeying God and His commands. We see that they haven't obeyed, and just chapter 17 was a real indication of that. Right from the get-go, we saw a Levite who was not of the Aaron's lineage, so should not have been a priest. So Micah made him a priest, and really the Levite who should have been employed in the service of God and Jehovah, and supported by the tithes of the nation, wasn't, because the law wasn't being obeyed, and therefore this Levite in chapter 17 was being forced to basically find his own placement, which he did in the house of Micah. So in 17 we saw stolen money, the Lord being invoked to bless the shrines. The Lord being invoked to bless the thief, shrines replacing the tabernacle, and then also Levites as common people consecrated as priests, and then idols to worship Jehovah. And then in chapter 17, we had left off. It says, "Then Micah said, 'Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since I have a Levite as a priest.'" And in beginning chapter 18, "In those days there was no king in Israel." And all of this brings to mind Proverbs chapter 14, verse 12, where it says, "There is a way that seems right to man, but its end is the way of death." That's exactly what we're seeing here. Is Micah being the perfect example of just kind of paving his own way, right? It seems right to him, and all in all, it leads to death. And then chapter 18, the Danites as a whole accept Micah's idolatry we see here. And so in chapter 18, and it says, "And in those days the tribe of Israel, or excuse me, the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in. For until that day their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them." So the Danites did have an area. They did have an area, but they considered it too small. So they were seeking more. They wanted more land and more territory. So there was this segment of the Danites that were seeking out more land. And so what they did is they had set aside 5 men to spy out the land and search it. So going into this area of the mountains of Ephraim, which the 5 spies end up going to the house of Micah, and they had lodged there. And so while they were there, um, they recognized the voice of the young Levite, and they ended up having this interaction with the Levite, asking him in verse 3, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What do you have here?" And he said to them, "Thus and so Micah did for me. He has hired me, and I have become his priest." So they said to him, "Please inquire of God that we may know whether the journey on which we go will be prosperous." So these 5 spies are seeking out counsel from this Levite, who again should not be looked upon as a priest. Please inquire of God. And then the priest said to him, Go in peace. The presence of the Lord be with you on your way. So the 5 men depart. They go to Laish. And in Laish, they see people there dwelling safely in the manner, it says, in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. And there were no rulers in this land who might put them to shame for anything. They were far from the Sidonians, and they had no ties with anyone. So they come back and they report, and then it says 600 men of the family of the Danites go from there armed with weapons of war. And they go through the mountains of Ephraim. They come to the house of Micah. And while they're there in the house of Micah, they take they take from Micah's house in verse 18. They take the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molded image. And then the priest says to them, "What are you doing?" And so they're saying to this Levite who had been appointed as priest, "Be quiet, put your hand over your mouth, and come with us." Verse 19. "Be a father and a priest to us. Is it better for you to be a priest to the household of one man, or that you be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel?" So the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod, the household idols, and the carved image, and took his place among the people. So ultimately, this group of Danites, now with this the stuff stolen from Micah's house, including the Levite, they go to Laish, they overtake it, they burn the city, and they actually rebuild the city, and they're dwelling there, and they call this area the city of Dan as well. And then it says in verse 30, the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image, and Jonathan the son of Gershom the son of Manasseh and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of captivity of the land. So they set up themselves Micah's carved image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. So now this everything from the house of Micah is now in this small tribe of Danites. So just everything's backwards. And then this captivity that is referred to, it's not certain whether this is referring to the Philistine captivity from that we'll see in 1 Samuel, or the Assyrian captivity, which we'll see in 2 Kings. So chapter 19 and 20 and 21 is basically all one complete account of an event here that we're going to look at. And again, in chapter 19, it says there was no king in Israel. And so we have seen this over and over, no king in Israel, no king in Israel. And then ultimately, looking ahead, it's going to end in chapter 21 with verse 25. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And that's what we're seeing all throughout here. So 19, 20, 21, there's a Levite who has a concubine in chapter 19. And so he's married to this concubine, and she, it says, plays the harlot against him in verse 2. And so she goes to her father's house in Bethlehem in Judah. And then her husband, this Levite, arises and goes after her. And while there he spends some time with his father-in-law. And we see through the beginning of chapter 19 that this father-in-law, every time this Levite and his concubine go to leave, the father-in-law wants him to stay, and he gives into this a couple of times, and then finally he rises and departs. It says in verse 10, and came opposite Jebus, that is Jerusalem, and with him were the 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine. It looks like he had servants as well. They were near Jebus, and the day was far spent. And the servant said to his master, "Come, please, let us turn aside into the city of the Jebusites and lodge in it." But his master said to him, "We will not turn aside here into a city of foreigners who are not of the children of Israel. We will go on to Gibeah." And this is where all this action is about to take place, in Gibeah. And so while in Gibeah, it says the sun goes down, and they passed by and went there, and the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. So we're going to see this in Gibeah, and then these Benjamites, and as they're there, they're kind of hanging out in the town square, and they don't have a place to stay. this Levite and his concubine and the servants and the donkeys. So this man who was also from the mountains of Ephraim, verse 16, um, he sees this traveler, and the old man says, "Where are you going, and where do you come from?" And so the Levite tells him, "We're passing from Bethlehem in Judah toward the remote mountains of Ephraim. I am from there." So he's just relating the how he had gotten there, passing through Bethlehem and Judah. And the old man says, "Peace be with you. However," verse 20, "let all your needs be my responsibility. Only do not spend the night in the open square." And so this old man brings them in into his place. And it says in verse 22, "As they were enjoying themselves, suddenly certain men of the city, perverted men, surrounded the house and beat on the door. They spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, 'Bring out the man who came to your house, that we may know him carnally.' But the master of the house, went out to them and said, 'No, I beg you, don't act so wickedly. See, this man is coming to my house. Do not commit this outrage. Look, here is my virgin daughter and the man's concubine.' And so the men took the concubine and brought her out to them. And it says in verse 25, and they knew her and abused her all night until morning, until the day, till the daybreak. A couple things here. One is during this time period with the nomadic Arabs, there's this law of the tent. It's called the law of the tent, and basically anyone who physically enters the tent of another person enjoys sanctuary there, and the owner will suffer extreme shame if any harm comes to his guest. So that's why we're seeing this man offering up his virgin daughter and also offering up the concubine of the Levite. Um, and basically what happened here is this concubine was gang raped by these perverted men, and ultimately she dies. And when she dies, the Levite, it says here, when the master rose in the morning, opened the doors, there was a concubine fallen at the door, and he says to her, "Get up, let's get going." She doesn't answer, and when he enters the house, he takes a knife. So he takes a knife and he cuts her up into 12 pieces, and so he sends one of the pieces of her and this notification to the tribes. Uh, and as such, in chapter 20, as this all comes together, the people of Israel gather at Mizpah. So they gather together, and it says, verse 7 of chapter 20, "Look, all of you who are children of Israel, give your advice and counsel here and now." So they come up against the Benjamites, all the tribes of Israel, and they ask them in verse 13, "Now therefore deliver up the perverted men who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove the evil from Israel." Instead, verse 14, "The children of Benjamin gathered together from the cities of Gibeah to go to battle against the children of Israel." So they wouldn't give up the perverted men. Instead, they're choosing to go to battle against the people of Israel, which they do. And then we see this series of finally the children of Israel are inquiring of God again. They're even asking in verse 18, "Which of us shall go up first, against the Benjamites?" And the Lord says, "Judah first." And then in a second time, "Shall I again draw near the battle?" So the first time, Judah is not successful. And then should they go up again? And the Lord says, "Yes, go up against them again." And then in verse 27, it says, "So the children of Israel inquire of the Lord again," um, wondering, "Hey, we can't overtake them. Should we keep going?" And then the Lord says, "Yes, indeed. Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand." Verse 28. So they are delivered into their hand. They defeat them, and then there's this 600 men. And so there's this remnant, verse 47, of the Benjamites that turned and fled toward the wilderness. So there were about 26,000 in the tribe of Benjamin. Now there's only this remnant of 600, and there's this vow made at Mizpah in chapter 21, where the Israelites say, "None of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin as a wife." But yet they're in grief, and they do not want the tribe of Benjamin to be blotted out. So they have a solution, which we'll see together. We'll just kind of pick up and do a quick closure of chapter 21 when we're together next time. We only have 10 seconds left. So till next time, when we finish Judges, just a quick summary and get into Ruth. God bless.